Hello, and welcome to the Interactive Age. My name is Paul Schumann, and to my right is my colleagues Donna Presswood and Barbara Benjamin, and we're here to be your hosts on the topic of leadership in the interactive age. And today's topic is integrating technologies in the age of interaction. This is the fourth in the series of programs on leadership in the interactive age. In the previous sessions, we have gone through the topics of leadership and technology. Is your mental map ready? In which we began to talk about how technology is affecting the way in which we think, work, live, and perceive our worlds. In the second session, we talked about personal ingenuity and emerging technologies, bringing up the subject of ingenuity as a new concept of an old idea and how that's related to technologies. In the third session, we talked about knowledge and the ethics of technology, in which we describe how important it is to understand what your purpose is and what your organization's purpose is in the choice and uses of technology. In that session, we talked about knowledge and continual change, shifting perspectives of work, technology and purpose, and ingenuity and personal growth. And Barbara, we ended the session with a discussion of our purpose and what are we here for?
Yes, as we summarized our program, we realized that we've relinquished a lot of our tasks to technology. And therefore, we have to say, well, if we're not doing those tasks, what are we doing? Well, some of the things we're doing is utilizing technology to expand our capabilities. And we are increasing our tolerance for the risk and uncertainty that is around us when we step beyond what we normally are doing and expand our expectations of what is possible. And we are here to reclaim the power of our ingenuity, to know, to be, and create, and to build community. I talked about our purpose with Ginny Silver, and Ginny Silver is the manager of development for the technical professionals at International Paper. She started at International Paper as a bench chemist and moved through several of her own unexpected possibilities and became a trainer for development. And I asked Ginny, how important is it for us to open up our tolerance for risk and expand our sense of what is possible and live in what I call the scary region of life? And this is what Ginny told me.
Yes, and what happens once you accept that scary area and you step into it, amazing things start to happen, and connections and interactions and growth. It just accelerates. You don't have to work at it. It takes you with it.
In today's session, we're going to be talking about integrating technologies in the age of interaction. The purpose of this particular session is to enable you to better perceive information technology as your teammate. And you will learn how to use and improve these technologies in teamwork and creativity, and to lift communication to the level of conversation. I had the chance to talk with Jan Brown recently, and one of the questions I was able to ask Jan is what, for technical professionals in particular, what's needed most of all in this age of interaction? And Jan's comments I think you'll find to be most interesting.
Yeah, so the other piece that I wouldn't necessarily call high-tech, but that's definitely used is the ability to communicate on a one-on-one level and human interaction. And we kind of lose that sometimes when we think about the electronic world that we live in. And even going back to what I was saying about the distributed office that exists on 5 continents and multiple places within those continents, all people working together on the same team to solve a problem. In a sense, that's being done today in science. I mean, scientists worldwide talk to each other all the time. Question is, are they all working for the same corporation? Or are they all working, they may all be working on the same technical problem, but working in different corporations or for different governments. What's the piece that binds them, that lets them talk to each other and be willing to talk to each other now that the means are able for them to do that on a daily basis. It's trust, it's understanding and valuing the individual. So there's a huge level of human communications that is also very, very important to how I do my work that I wouldn't necessarily call technology. But we're not taught very well how to deal with it. Certainly our educational system doesn't do it. I mean, if you're studying to be a scientist or an engineer, the important thing is the core curriculum, the your coursework and depth in your field. Mm-hmm. And very little of that work is done in teams, although they're now starting to do that a little bit in universities to have some team projects. But you can opt not to do that. You can opt to do something singly by yourself instead of working in a team.
So it's still the idea of the lone scientist in his or her laboratory.
That's right.
Producing that answer.
But when you get in the real world, it's not like that at all. You have to work together with other people. And that's a piece that we don't teach. And I think that that's a piece that's going to become even more important if we're going to survive as a society. And I know that sounds like a real strong statement, but I really believe that, because if you just have these moles, if you will, these lone scientists or engineers or individual anywhere in society, but let's take the scientist and engineer working just by themselves from their home, where's the connect? Where's the fabric of socialization? I mean, I think it'll fall apart. People need that human interaction. And I think that we need to help people do that. You know, the early office at home piece, that when some companies did that, they found that within, 3 to 6 weeks, people were spending, the first week it was like 5 days at home, then the next week it was maybe 4 days at home, and by the end of 6 weeks, they were back in the office more than half time, because they wanted the interaction with other people.
And they found that the motivations coming out of the home were difficult to...
Right, when they were just connected via computer or telephone. While in the interactive age, you can sit at home now and you can see people. I mean, you can turn on your PC and you can talk to your colleague in France, or you can talk to your colleague down the street. And so that communication piece and actually being able to talk to them real-time, face-to-face is going to be there. And people are going to be sitting off at home instead of in a physical workplace, but they're going to have that face-to-face interaction with all these people and be able to work on problems that way. And I think that the skills, the human skills of being able to interact are going to be real important. And we don't teach that.
The session topics today include technology, your teammate, space and time travel with information technology redefines teams and teamwork. Recently, I had the opportunity to talk with Eric Paul, who is the manager of training and organizational development for Motorola at the Austin Motorola site on Ed Bluestein. And Eric had several comments to make about teamwork, technology, and technology as the teammate.
Boy, that's a good question. I think we've seen a real swing, and I'm probably saying something that may not be real popular to some of your listeners in this program or your viewers. I think we've seen a real trend from quality circles to empowered teams. And in some organizations, empowered teams work really well. In some other organizations, they really don't. And I think the thing we're going to see in the future is finding a way to understand, is this right for X type of team? Is this environment the right place for a team? And I think those types of skills are going to be critical to formation of teams.
Paul, Eric felt that he had a perspective that perhaps was a little less popular than the listeners of this program. You, having been a technical professional before, also have a similar perspective, and I think that it would be interesting if you would share that with us.
Yeah, I think it's very important, as Eric points out, that we're careful in the application of teams. I think we all believe that the future that we're facing is that of group activity of some sort or another. But teamwork is a very dangerous term, because it comes with a lot of connotations depending on the person and their experiences with teams, and they can have negative or positive experiences. There's also all kind of teams. You can have a football team is certainly different than a baseball team, and that's different than a basketball team, and that's certainly different than a track team. The amount of interaction, the amount of dependency, the spatial and time relationships of people. And most of these teams are sports metaphors, and yet there are other kind of teams too, like surgical teams or legal teams, that exist. And there's a wide variety of teams, and it's just you have to be very careful in the use of the word team to make sure that you understand what it is you're talking about, and that the other people who are also with you have a similar understanding. So it's not only important to understand, as Eric says, whether you should apply teams or not to a certain situation, but also then study the type of team that is absolutely essential for what type of team applies to what situation. Now, you also talk with Betty Sue Flowers about the subject, is that right?
That's right, exactly. And Betty Sue, who is at the University of Texas in Austin, has a considerable amount of experience of working with the hero's journey. She was the editor of a book that had been written by Joseph Campbell, and she has a perspective that I think is very fascinating, and what she tells us about the hero's journey as it's applied to groups, I think is very important in today's session.
In organizations where a small group of people, has developed new software, for example, that's an easy example. They have definitely gone through a kind of hero's journey, dark night of the soul included, when all seemed lost and there was no hope. Well, many of them report that same cycle, and doing it in a group. So yes, I see that more and more as the model, as we more and more have to work as beings that are comprised of more than one human being. As systems become more complex, the organizational units themselves are complex. So individuals will become organizational units within a larger animal, if you will, which is the group, or sometimes the company. That's a different paradigm. That's really a different paradigm from individuals and on their own individual quest. The future will be the future of groups.
And therefore, I think interaction is going to be key in our environment. Two more areas that we have for topics. One is the information technology, teamwork and creativity, and communication and conversation.
And Barbara, you're going to tell us a little bit about technology and as a teamwork, both of the organization and individual.
Yes. You see, when the technology can be used as a teammate, as you said, in both organization and for the individual. And there are many applications of technology for an organization where the technology can be considered a teammate. Donna had spoken to Gary Epple several weeks ago, and he had discussed with her whether or not he would change in any way the field that he had gone into, which is network software development. And Donna asked him that question, and this was Gary's answer.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's actually like being in multiple industries and technologies all the time. The rate of change in this particular segment is so rapid. It's a real challenge to keep yourself educated and keep yourself up at the kind of the crest of the wave. So without committing to one technology or direction, you actually get the benefit of really seeing changes over every 2 to 3 to 4 years. So, and I see that continuing. We're right now on the verge of this real enterprise-wide computing. All the major companies, the Fortune 500 companies, are understanding the benefit of being able to connect their sites and connect their people and improve communication and the advantages of technology. And there's still tremendous problems that have to be solved there in scalability and user training and usability of products and security issues and replication and availability. We're just scratching the surface on those right now.
Yes, and as Gary has alluded to, there are many benefits to organizations in applying technology as a teammate, and the benefits are not only for the company internally, but also for the consumer. I had a long talk about this with Paul Duffley, who is the Vice President of Trade Management for PepsiCo. And he explained how PepsiCo applies technology as a teammate, both for the internal benefit of the company and for the consumer.
Well, we have three divisions. Our businesses break out into the food away from home business, which is our restaurant division, and that's made up of Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Taco Bell. The technology that applies to those businesses, particularly in the case of Pizza Hut, which is not only a sit-down restaurant, but they have offered 4 years ago home delivery service. And part of the home delivery service is the breakthrough in computer technology where attendants who answer the telephone have a computer-assisted information base. And if you are a repeat user of the Pizza Hut takeout service or delivery service, you generally can come up on the computer screen, and we can tell you what you ordered the last time and how you like your pizza. Whether you like pepperoni, and we get to know much more about you than you would probably like us to know. And we know how many are in the family, kind of the ages of the children, and we can actually reward heavy user consumers with incentives to purchase the product. So we can deal directly with the households. Unlike most other businesses that you have to go to a retail store to get it, and this is one case where technology has really helped us to deliver a message directly to the households.
Paul touched upon a subject that PepsiCo is obviously very sensitive to, and that's the importance of ethics when you use technology as a teammate, because you become aware of a great deal of information about people's private lives, and it's very important to use that information in an ethical way. And I think that certainly PepsiCo is sensitive to that, and it's important that other organizations remain sensitive to that as well.
There are actually many points to technology as your teammate, and one of the most important for the sessions is that we have the opportunity to utilize interactive technology on this particular program. We have an 800 number, we also have a fax number, and those numbers are available to the people who are participating in this program to call at their convenience, and if you have a question or a comment, we'd be most happy to entertain those. Technology as your teammate, again, has many aspects to it. One of the most important, perhaps, is the support. That technology does lend a great deal of support to all of us as we're trying to do our jobs and accomplish the tasks and purposes that we're here for. In addition, we have many challenges to the technology as well as our teammate. One of them Barbara mentioned as an organizational challenge for the ethics, but we as individuals also have similar challenges, that we have access to far more information than we could possibly handle, and we also get the opportunity to utilize the information in many ways. And it is really our ethical interaction with this technology and with the information that leads us to be who we are and what we're all about.
And Donna, also I think that technology as a personal teammate certainly raises our expectations of what we can do.
Absolutely.
I certainly have that experience. I'm a poet, Pulitzer Prize nominated poet, cookbook author, spiritual director. I do seminars and retreats in creative development. I couldn't even begin to think of doing all these things if I didn't have technology to assist me and enable me to do these things. And also, we become interdependent with our technology. And here, a very important distinction to make is the difference between interdependence and dependence. I think it's dangerous when we depend on our technology to take over some of the functions that our minds have to take over. I use the example of a calculator for students who may have a little trouble with multiplication tables because possibly they have some learning disabilities. Well, that's good. That's a good interdependence. But it's not good if they depend on it to do all of the computing functions that they really need to use for their mental development.
And also it extends our capability. And again, it's very important how we treat this extension of our capability. It gives us the ability to do things that we've never done before as individuals, and it shifts the way in which we perceive and interact with the work that we're trying to accomplish. It causes us to reintegrate the technology in our rethinking of the way we look at our work. For example, in us putting together this presentation, the technologies that we have of the videos and the computers and the computer graphics, and we've done it all with very minimal support in using our own technologies, and that forces us to rethink how we work and also extends our capability to do a lot of these additional functions. So it does extend our capability, and as a result of that, it forces us to create a new mental map of ourselves and our work and our lives. And when we can do that, then technology can become really our teammate. Now, as you begin to learn this new skill of using technology, you go through various stages of development, starting first with the novice, and then moving to the advanced beginner, and beyond that to competence, to proficiency, and expertise. And I want to spend just a couple of minutes going through this. This is a model that is very general, that applies not only to the development of skill of using new technology, but just any major life skill, whatever it is, or the development of relationships with a company or other individuals or anything of it. It's a major endeavor, a major life skill, and it takes somewhere between 7 and 10 years to reach a level of expertise. Now what this says is you've got to be very careful about which one of the technologies that you want to choose to make your teammate, because you're going to invest a large portion of your life in learning that to get to a level of expertise. Therefore, you should choose them very carefully. And don't be frustrated if you can't achieve a level of expertise instantaneously. Now, let's look at the various stages of development of a skill, going from the novice level. And if we use the example of learning how to drive a car, that's something that we all have experienced at one time or another. And in the novice level, you're very involved with the objective features, rules, regulations. You really are going by the rule book, and you learn first from a rule book, and then you're tested against your knowledge of the rules that you've learned in the rule book. When you have gained that level of expertise, then you're allowed to do some practice driving. And in that stage, then you're in the advanced beginner. You then begin to think about situations. You have a driving instructor. Your driving instructor is telling you, I want you to turn left up here, watch for those cars here, do this, do that. And you're talking in terms of situations and examples. As you gain additional levels of expertise, getting to competence, what you find is that your rule-bound kind of view begins to fade away. You no longer are beginning to look at it from the set of rules, but begin to think about it in terms of the situation and the experience and the expertise that you have developed, and you find that the old ways of looking at the world begin to fall away. And you deal with the relevant features, you begin to plan, and you have involvement for the first time. Again, going back to driving a car, you may indeed begin to defend the way you're driving at this point if somebody criticizes your driving. When you go to the next level of proficiency, you just have an intuitive understanding of what needs to be done. You perceive the structure, and you still drop back and think analytically about what to do under certain circumstances. When you reach the level of expertise, you just perform the appropriate action. There's no problem solving and no reasoning. And that's, of course, why in race cars and in race driving, people hate to see novices get on the field, because you don't know how they're going to react in split-second decision circumstances. And it's why, for example, that the insurance rates in automobile driving are higher for children for the first 7 or 8 years of driving. At the age 25 or so, the rates drop off, and that's usually after 7 or 8 years of experience. So there's all kind of data that show you that this is indeed a true model. What research says is that you have to accumulate about 50,000 chunks of information about a subject, about a skill, in order to be able to interrelate these and interact with them at various levels to reach a level of expertise. Now, this is not a linear process, although we can show it that way. You go from one step to the other, from novice to advanced beginner, but you also come back and loop back through this process many times. And the way in which you learn something like a new computer program, it may not be a new life skill, so it's probably not 7 years, but it's probably a couple of years to use some of the very sophisticated things, and you go through it in the same way. This model would also be useful in the design of products, so that the product unveils itself to the user as that level of expertise becomes possible. Now, Donna, when you get ready to evaluate whether you're going to incorporate our technology or not, besides this investment, this huge investment of time, what are some of the other factors that you have to deal with?
Well, as it turns out, Paul, there are many other factors that you do have to take into consideration. First and foremost are the costs. Now, we're going to come back to that one, I think, in a little bit later. So let me go on with some of the other things. Barbara, one of the things that I know we've discussed between ourselves is about the alignment of purpose and goals.
Yes, this is really essential because not only of the initial cost of software and hardware, but also the cost of training. And technology is for some people like a toy, and they look at it and they say, wow, I need to have that. That's really a groovy, wonderful new thing. And they go out and buy it because of the wow effect, not making sure that that piece of technology is aligned with their bottom line, with their competitive advantage, and with their purpose, and all of these factors. And so you really have to think twice when you decide to integrate a new technology into your work, because of if you don't, you have tremendous costs, and then you have a new toy that's going to cost you a lot and not really give you the maximum benefit for your investment.
I think that's a very interesting point. On the other hand, there are also environmental pressures that we always have to take into consideration. And these pressures may be that in the industry or in the profession that we're in, that it is very much required that we stay on the cutting edge of the technology that is out there. And so we have to understand, where are we? Besides what is our purpose and what are our goals, is what environmental pressures are around us that help us make these decisions and move us forward. In addition, we really need to focus on the projections of the technology itself. Where is this technology going? How fast is it going? What is its penetration rate? And what are the obvious side roads that this technology can develop for us? And last, and perhaps not even least at all, is the space in between the skills that we're learning in this technology. Because one of the clear things that's going to happen is that we ourselves as individuals, not just as organizations, but as individuals, are going to have to invest a great deal of time in personal training and in organizational training and in personal development. And you have to do this in order to get full utility out of the technology that is being presented to you.
Well, let's go back now and look at the cost issue in a little bit more detail, because it's a very, of course, a very important criteria. David Pierce Snyder, who we've seen on earlier programs, earlier sessions, and whom you will see a little bit later on today, and his colleague Greg Edwards have done a lot of work for a number of years about the incorporation of technology. And they've looked at some of the costs. And it's kind of interesting to go back and look at those costs of incorporating technology into an organization. It always comes with a much bigger backside of it than people realize. The image that always comes to mind is the camel with its nose under the tent. This time the camel's kneeling with their head, just their nose right under the tent, and the two big double humps on the back side of it sticking out. And you know if you let the nose in, the two big humps are going to come through later. And that's indeed the case of technology. If you look at the 1980s view of technology and its cost, what you'll find is that the hardware costs were only about 10%. We're talking about information technology costs here now. Software cost about 40% of the total cost, and training about 50%. And so the view of just buying some hardware and then, oh yeah, we got to buy some software, and then all of a sudden realizing, well, you got to double that cost to include the amount of training to use the computers. And of course what happens a lot is that the training gets cut out and you keep buying more and more hardware and more software, and it just means the organization gets further and further behind. If you look at the 1990s view of that by Schneider and Edwards, what they say is, well, in reality, hardware and software is only 3 to 8% of the total cost. Training is 40 to 50% of the total cost, but then organizational and management development is 50 to 60% of the cost. And of course, that's what's all behind the re-engineering movement of starting from the information design of the organization. And what you realize is that if you're going to let this camel into your tent, that not only do you have the hump of training, but you've got the double hump of the organization, management, and development that have to come through. And so you have to redesign the organization, you have to redesign your management systems, and you have to think the whole business all over again because of the impact of technology. Now, looking at that in a tabular form, it says the same thing, that in order to transform an organization, that you have to go through the 3 stages of technology, training, and then the organizational and management redesign, which primarily now is integrating new concepts and new perspectives on teams. But let's take that view just a little bit further. In order to do that, we got to go back again to the past before we can move to the future. Let's assume that we're back in the 60s, and that's when I started my career in this field. And the idea was that you buy some hardware, and let's say that that's a unit cost of 1. Then what we found in the 70s was you had to add software, and that just about doubled your cost, that you had to put in about an equal amount of software as hardware. And then in the 80s, what we found is you had to add the training, and that was about double the cost of the hardware and software together. And then we found that you had to add this organizational development piece, and that doubles again the total cost. Now what we're saying here in these sessions is you've got to go a step beyond that. Now you've got to go to personal transformation, that the organization, all the other things that you do will not have any major impact on the effectiveness or efficiency of the organization unless the individuals in the organization themselves transform. And if experience of the history is valid, what it says is that's going to cost as much as all the other costs put together. And that means that we're just beginning to touch the impact of technology, information technology, on businesses and organizations. So it says that technology is roughly only 2% of the cost. The training is about 8%, teamwork and other organizational development about 40%, and personal transformation another 50% to get to the total organizational transformation piece.
Yes.
And what it says is that we're really looking at this pyramid kind of upside down, right? We are looking at it from a hardware perspective, and we have this big, heavy load of personal change and organizational development on the other side.
And the upshot of it is that we really have to rethink the way we work.
Yeah.
Yes, and you know, when you talked about the cost of human transformation, Paul, it's not like buying a piece of hardware where you know you have the hardware. You buy it and you have it. You buy the piece of software and you have it. When you invest in humans and their transformation, you're not necessarily going to get that transformation because there can be a lot of resistance. And I spoke to Don Haneke about this, and he is the president of Perspectives International. And he talked about the importance of people changing their attitudes to technology in order for this transformational training to be effective.
Well, Well, the big pitfall, of course, is the fact you can have great technology and tremendous technological change, and it will fail for one reason only, and that's the non-acceptance of the people who are supposed to implement it. The technology can work, but it always fails when it does because of people. Now, what we have to start doing is recognizing that we need to train people not to just change the technological base or the uses of technology in society, but to change the way they think about technology and the way they think about change, as you were saying earlier. And we need to train people in parallel tracks. We tend to get focused. You can almost see the cyclical nature of training and of knowledge. For a while, we're involved with training people on what we were talking about earlier, the soft sciences, which, as you know, I object to very strongly, because soft is a connotative word, that subjective word that says, well, of course, it's not so important because it's soft. It's kind of wishy-washy. And we'll deal with the hard stuff, the technology, the tools, that sort of thing. The hardest thing to deal with is people. Now, unfortunately, we use these terms, which makes it very easy for us to ignore the problem. We say, well, we'll deal with the hard stuff first. And as anyone in your audience will recognize, that when times get tough, the first thing that gets cut out in almost all corporations, not all, but almost all, is the humanistic training, the training on how to think, the training on how to deal with change. I happen to do that kind of training, and I feel it. As soon as times get tough, people say, well, we can't do that now, none of the wishy-washy, touchy-feely stuff. We'll deal now with getting more computers in, and the people are so upset they can't deal with anything. So we tend to back off from those things that are more difficult. It's easy to deal with things. It's easy to deal with the camera. It's easy to deal with a computer compared to a human being. So we call them soft, which tends sometimes to be a cop-out, to get away from having to deal with them because we can kind of brush them off. And we'll deal with the hard stuff, which is really important to business. Any business person worth his or her salt has to admit that what makes businesses run is not machines, people. Even the robots in the factories of the automobile manufacturers have to be designed by and run by and organized by, implemented by, and analyzed by people. So we tend to want to do one thing or the other, but we need to work in both parallel paths.
So as Don says, we get caught in a trap of viewing some of the, quote, soft things as things that can be eliminated, when in reality that's the very thing that we should be focusing on most. And so our pyramid here that we've looked at before is flowing both ways, from the hardware to the software to training to organization development to personal change, and it's kind of upside down. And I don't know how we can turn this around, Donna and Barbara, but we really should be starting first from personal change and then moving back the other way. And we talked, as we were preparing for this, examples, like the environmental movement that was a change of consciousness, a change of purpose of individuals and society, and from that now has driven a lot of new technologies to be able to control the environment, to eliminate pollutants, to clean up the environment and things of that nature.
Yeah. We have to be pretty patient with personal change, though, and even the environmental example you give, Paul, that was a crisis. And so the crisis spurred the personal change, and that's your right side of this organizational transformation chart, where something is coming up from the bottom, and here crisis is coming up from the bottom, hitting personal change, and personal change then starts another cycle of new technologies and responses. So that when it comes to personal transformation, as I said before, it's not like buying software or hardware. You don't get dollar for dollar cost effectiveness. You have to be real patient with that process and understand that sometimes change does not occur until there is a level of crisis, and we've talked about crisis often, where it's the crossover between opportunity and risk.
And one of the other problems is that hardware or software, you've got discrete things, you've got something you can see, you pay for it, it's a unit price, and you can increase that or you can decrease it. When you talk about personal transformation or organizational development, it's very diffuse, hard to put your arms around what those costs are. And Donna, you spoke with Eric Paul again about some of these subjects.
That's exactly right. And Eric, being within the human resource development arena within Motorola, says that that he, among his other colleagues within Motorola and his colleagues in other professions, are struggling with this from an organizational standpoint. And I asked him about the range of technology teammates that they in Motorola were looking for, and what kind of technologies did they need to help the organization and help the people within the organization do their work better and help make the transformation. And his perspective was,
one of the technologies, which you may not think of as a technology, is communication skill. The ability to talk with people, the ability to interview people to pull data, and the ability to assimilate a large amount of data into some kind of coherent pattern so that you can figure out what's really going on. Sometimes it's beneath the words that you're hearing or behind what you saw when you went and did observation. So data collection skills are important. Communication skills to feed the information back, to train people, to help people with presentations and so forth. Computer usage is very important. I think an understanding of the technology of the disciplines you work with. So when I work with engineers, I need to understand enough about what they do to speak the similar language that they do. When I work with the technicians, I need to know enough about what an Allen wrench is, or when they're talking about millitors of mercury, I need to know a little bit about what that means, or I'm no longer a person that they feel like they can converse with. So getting comfortable with an environment, I think, is another technology or skill that we need to be able to work with. I'd say those are the primary ones.
the range of technology teammates go along the lines from telecommunications to analytical instruments to design aids to application software to television and compact disc usage.
And also, diagnostics has proved a very valuable teammate in everything from the automobile, which we talked about, to the medical field. And use the automobile example of diagnostics, what you have to understand about them is that while they're a very helpful tool, the new product and the diagnostics will always have a gap between them, sort of like the race between the tortoise and the hare. And I spoke to Dave Munson, who's the president of Sterling Health Services, and he's involved in using diagnostics as a teammate in helping to diagnose and serve people who are in a crisis, in a health crisis.
The unique part of what you just said, though, was it starts with the initial diagnosis. It could be a PET scan or a CAT scan, and that kind of information transferred to a variety of specialists around the world electronically for their input. I mean, an ambulance driver today has on the scene communication with the hospital when that emergency medical technician is providing whatever his service is at the scene of the accident. So that communication is already taking place into the hospital and to any nurses on call or whatever, or specialists. So it actually starts at the very beginning.
So here's one of the examples of technology as a teammate in diagnostics and communications in the health field. There are also a wide variety of different other types of diagnostics, whether it's computer technology or automobiles or any other variety of things. You know, we mentioned earlier, I think it was Donna was talking about the projections of technology and being able to understand whether something is going to penetrate and whether it's something that can be worth investment of all this time and energy from an organizational or a personal perspective. There was one example that probably was just a side route in healthcare that people thought offered a great deal of potential, and that was multiphasic screening, which came up in the 70s, and it really was the old industrial model of healthcare, which is, I know what we'll do. We'll develop all these diagnostic systems, and then every year we'll run somebody through a full battery of tests, and out of that we'll be able to tell whether the person is healthy or not. And what we found was that that model really didn't work, that the human body was far too complex, and there wasn't any finite set of tests that could be run that would give you any degree of assurance that somebody was really healthy. And so the diagnostics in terms of the human body is probably going to always stay behind the capabilities.
Yeah, and one of the shortcomings of that is it does not emphasize keeping yourself healthy at all.
Right. It puts the reliance on a machine And it's just the exact wrong thing to be doing,
Right.
which is you take personal responsibility, and you have your own way of sensing what's going on in your body. And if you listen to those signals, quite often you could tell yourself whether you're healthy or not.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point we were making before between interdependence with technology or
Right,
dependence.
and dependence, right. And not that you don't want to use health technologies, it's just that the amount of dependence that you put on it versus interdependence. Now, Donna, you also talked with David Snyder about this subject of team technology and using technology as his personal teammate.
Yes, indeed. And I specifically asked David what technologies did he consider to be the most important teammates for the kind of work that he does. And his response, I think, is most interesting because of the range of technologies that he uses.
The photocopier, then the word processor, surely has made it perhaps more than anything else possible for a single person to set up a shop and convey the notion of being a practicing professional. I mean, you really don't have to have any staff. You can be all by yourself. And by the end of this decade, when we'll be just chatting with the computers rather than keyboarding into them, it will be hugely facile for an individual to set up shop, and you will not be able to know how many people work for this person.
Will it
2,
matter?
4, 8, 10. I don't know. They turn out a ton of work, and it's always really nice, and it's here on time. But indeed, it may not matter. We won't know. Indeed, it's just going to change all kinds of things as we finally become so good at the information technology that they are just essentially like little ancillary devices, auxiliary peripheral equipment on you, the human being. You're the center of the organization, and then all these, the CD-ROM reader and all the rest of this are simply adjuncts to you. The central processor in this business is the one that you carry around up here, not the one, the CPU in your computer.
That's an auxiliary.
That's right. That's all. That's an ancillary or a peripheral equipment to this thing. And then for me, the next thing that is crucial is the wonderful American air transport system that enables me to commute to 5 or 6 cities a week, week in, week out, and reliably get me there. I mean, in 3,500 engagements, I've only missed 2. Right? Now, all these complaints that we make about the air travel system, notwithstanding, the Brits used to rave about their wonderful railroad system, that almost every town in Britain was served by rail and was always on time and so forth. And they bemoaned its loss when it finally was no longer possible to have the kind of labor and so forth, and the automobile and the highway came along and supplanted the train, and they have never really gotten over the loss of their wonderful rail system. Our air transport system does what their rail system did in spades, and it does it for a country that is 10 times larger. And it is a spectacle that we are able to do this. Yes, there are little problems, and the little commuter airlines that we're now worried about. Hey, that's just the latest extension of the capillary dimension of this network. No wonder that it's not yet quite debugged. It grew very rapidly over the last 7 or 8 years, and we'll get it taken care of, and then it'll be all right. But it's a wonderful thing, and that certainly has made it possible for me to do that on 2 accounts. It enables me to go around, and it enables the rest of the world to regularly attend meetings in which there are 500 or 1,000 people gathered to hear me talk. Now, if we look down the road a little bit and talk about, but this video conferencing, right? People aren't going to go to conferences. Right. It's too expensive. It takes too much time. Well, indeed, last year, for the first time, the American Air Transport Association announced that there had been a 2% decline in business travel, which they traced directly to video conferencing and computer conferencing. They said, it's finally started to happen. We are beginning to make the technology transfer from physically moving people on the inner city system. Now, we're not talking about flex place workers working out of their home, but on the inner city system, people are traveling less for business than they would have. And when we survey them and say, why didn't you take this trip? They're telling me, I didn't have to. We got together on a video conference. We got together on the computer conference, and so it turned out we didn't need to do this. It is not yet clear whether or not we will, in the future, do away with business travel altogether. So that there are certainly several forecasts I've read that said, well, it's going to be a wonderful future for transportation, but it's all going to be recreational. Nobody will travel, or almost nobody will travel for business in the future, because it'll be so much more efficient to travel electronically.
And you're saying the data really isn't there yet.
But that's right. Well, it's too early, and you begin to think, well, are people really that way? Will they really be able? There are a lot of folks that just are not comfortable dealing with people and reaching really important decisions to collaborate unless I've had a chance to meet the person, watch their body English, and press the flesh. Yeah, but 10 or 15 years from now, every office will be equipped with a large wall screen. And when we talk about video phone, you're not going to have a video phone with a little talking head on it. The video phone will be connected to the wall screen so that when you're talking to this person, you see them in their office in context, and there are their three assistants. And they, meanwhile, are seeing you and whoever's with you in your room on their wall screen. So you will see them. You'll do everything but press the flesh. We'll be able to joke and gesticulate and look into one another's eyes. And in that respect, will we feel the need to get together quite so much? Well, I don't know that. That's what I'm saying. It's too early to understand that. But certainly if you look at the things that people say about how they hate business travel and what a waste of time it is and so forth, I can't help but believe that just as it is fairly probable that we're going to watch a great massive migration of work to the home over the next 5 to 10 years, the underlying data about business travel would suggest that the pressure is there for the same kind of thing, the vast reduction in business travel, as it is possible to replace it with the information highway with wonderful visual graphic interchanges so that everybody can see one another and we can have the same level of communication physically removed from one another that we now feel we can only get while being in the same room.
David describes very eloquently technology as his teammate and begins to talk about technology as your teammate and the organization's tools for future development. David is a person that we've known for a number of years, 10 or 12 years, as an active futurist, and he is someone whose opinions we trust a great deal. We've watched a lot of what David has said come true, and he's certainly been very influential in our perspectives. Let's go back and just review, just for a second now, what we've talked about this morning. We talked about technology and its impact on you as an individual and the organization, and how just the cost of the technology is not sufficient to depict the total cost of what's required, both for you as an individual, and the amount of training and involvement and commitment you have to have. And Donna, there were other factors that we talked about as well.
That's right, Paul. And I think the two most important factors that we have to take into consideration, in addition to the cost is always going to be there. But we have to consider the fact that we must learn a certain set of technologies and become expert in them, and that's going to require a commitment from all of us in order to develop the expertise in those technologies. The other thing is become absolutely clear that our communication skills are going to be paramount for the environment of the interactive age. Those of us who neglect to develop our communication skills are going to be the ones of us who probably will fall by the wayside and have a most difficult time in this interactive age.
And Barbara, David also touched, he kind of foreshadowed some of the things we're going to be talking about in a few minutes.
Yes, he certainly did. In the last part of his talk, and you know, he said, well, the screen we're going to be looking on isn't going to be this big, it's going to be this big. And we have a sense that we're going to be able to travel across space and time and expand our expectations of communication and our capabilities in interacting and communicating with each other with this technology that's coming down the road. And of course, as Donna said, the most important element in using those technologies will be our ability to use the language and communicate. And we will be discussing many of these aspects of communication and discussion and conversation when we come back after our break. We will be taking a 10-minute break and in a little while, and we'll be discussing some of the things that David has been foreshadowing.
So we'll see you in 10 minutes.